We're going to keep the intro on this one short and sweet. Part 3 of 10 Brutal NASCAR crashes. If you haven't seen the first 2 videos, I'll link them in the description below so you can go check those ones out when you're finished watching this one. And like the previous videos, there are no fatalities in any of the crashes here, and they are in no particular order. So with that being said, let's get right into number 10. The 2002 Pennsylvania 500 at Pocono Raceway saw a first lap accident between Dale Earnhardt Incorporated teammates Steve Park and Dale Earnhardt Jr.
Oh, trouble! Steve Park is off into the infield. Another car valve over on his lid. It's Park and Dale Jr. Terrible crash.
Man, Steve Park's car just turned dead left when he came off turn 2. Junior's running to see his teammate and see if he's okay.
And getting off into that wet grass wasn't going to do anything to slow those cars down. Caution is out. Ricky Rudd will lead the field back to the yellow.
We see the Jimmy Johnson car, and there's Rusty Wallace. You see Park trying to squeeze up the outside.
I see he was trying to go on the outside of Rusty. Rusty moves up, they make contact, and Junior gets under the one car and just kind of bulldozed him into the wall and over.
Yeah, that's what actually turned him even more sideways. But I'll tell you what, that guardrail did the job.
Oh, it did. It's a great job.
Took a lot of that absorbed a lot of impact right there.
Watch the yellow car back there just turn left.
And when you hit wet grass, it feels like you pick up 200 mile an hour.
But you can see how that barrier gave way when
Absolutely.
that car
That barrier absorbed a lot of energy, and I'll tell you what, that nice to see happen, because if that were a concrete wall, he would have taken a much harder hit.
One more shot. Rusty's right in the middle of the racetrack. Steve Park's going down the outside, but Rusty decides to come up to the outside line, not realizing that Steve was there. They made contact, and the ride is on.
Look at that barrier give. Thank goodness.
But again, that's one reason that Steve was able to walk away arm in arm with Dale Earnhardt Jr. because of that wall that did give.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%.
Thankfully, both drivers were uninjured in this accident. However, the race did have to be red flagged for over an hour to repair that guardrail that Steve Park went into. The 1988 Daytona 500 was the first Daytona 500 run with restrictor plates on the cars. Drivers were not too happy about this because they knew the robbed horsepower would bunch up the field, causing the risks for more accidents. And on this day, there would be a spectacular one as the King, Richard Petty, would go for a vicious tumble along the outside wall on the exit of turn number 4. Unfortunately, the accident happened during a commercial break, but as soon as it happened, the broadcast cut back as soon as they could.
Bad trouble, bad trouble.
Okay, a terrible crash. Richard Petty's car is turned over 7 or 8 times coming off turn 4 and was just struck by another car. It's one of the most violent accidents we've ever seen at the Daytona International Speedway here as leader Darrell Waltrip squeezes through. Petty's car nosed into the wall and then went sideways and barreled end over end and then side over side time after time. A terrible accident involving the man who has won this race 7 times over the years. Alan Krowicki in car number 7 was involved. His car is limping towards the pits, and there is the damaged number 43 STP Pontiac of Richard Petty out there on the track. It was really happened at one of the highest speed sections on the track, and we trust that Petty is okay in the car.
Richard Petty was running in a pack of cars, and the back end starts to go around, and it looks like it might have been tagged by the car number 73 of Phil Barkdahl, and you can see Petty's car just cramming and turning over up against the wall, and other cars coming in. There's Barkdahl hitting him as he came by, and the Eddie Beerswall car hitting one of the tires that came off the car.
From another angle. That looks like the crash at Darlington years ago, Ned.
Fortunately, it was staying on the nose of the car for so long, Ken, so it was didn't look like it was really taking hard bounces down onto the pavement.
And it dispels some of the energy. You must remind the viewers that these cars are built to take these kind of crashes. And there's Phil Barkdahl hitting the cement wall right in front of us. The chrome ollie frames that serve as a roll cage up under the roof to keep the car from crushing down on the driver.
Let's take a look from Ricky Rudd's vantage point.
107 laps complete. Another caution for the moment. Let's go back to Jerry Punch.
You can see the trouble start in front of him there. Whether the 73 car hit number 43, the 73 being driven by Phil Barkdahl, or Alan Kulwicki was in the middle of it too in the car number 7.
Thankfully, all the drivers were able to walk away from this accident. Richard Petty just had some torn ligaments in his ankle from this. And as well, no fans in the stands were injured during the wreck while Richard's car tumbled along the catch fence. The 2009 AAA 400 at Dover saw rookie Joey Logano learn the hard way exactly why they call it the Monster Mile, as he was involved in a multi-car collision after getting tapped in the rear by Tony Stewart going into turn number 3. The wreck included multiple drivers, but Joey Logano definitely got the worst of it, tumbling from the very top of the banking all the way down on the apron.
Joey Logano.
Big crash.
Oh, he's all tagged down.
Over and over, Logano goes between 3 and 4.
No.
The car will come back to rest on all 4 tires. Heavy crash here on lap 32.
So take a look at the transmission right now and some of the replays. And it looks like
Really just kind of a stack-up effect. Like was one of them got on the brakes and kind of forced. Yeah, look at Tony Stewart just missing this crash. Man, here's where it really gets exciting. Man.
We talked about that there's nowhere to go as you come off of these corners, and when something like this happens, you make a commitment, and you've got one opportunity really to miss this wreck. Tony Stewart did a great job. Some others got caught up in. Let's drive along with Tony Stewart here. See it develop right in front of him. He actually got into the back of the 20 as he checked up.
And you know it's going to be bad right here when he comes up in front of traffic. Reed Sorensen makes the impact. Scott Speed got a piece of it also.
The car's actually going backwards when it starts to lift up and go over and begin to tumble.
Yeah, it's just being pushed, and as he kind of dug in a little bit and it was continued to get pushed there, that's what got it up and rolling.
And you hear, you talk about how high the banks are here, and you see he's just tumbling down that bank. There's so much height difference right there from the top of the bank down to the apron.
3 stories, the difference between the top and the bottom, 24-degree banks.
Thankfully, Joey Logano and all other drivers were uninjured in this crash. The 2013 season-opening NASCAR Xfinity Series race, back then called the Nationwide Series, saw absolute chaos erupt, coming to the checkered flag on a green-white checkered. Amongst the carnage would be Kyle Larson, who gets catapulted into the outside catch fence.
Regan Smith 7, Keselowski 22, Stewart 33, and contact! Smith turned around. Tony Stewart is going to win this race. And a terrible crash coming to the finish.
This is a big wreck.
Kyle Larson's car with the front end severely torn off. He's bailing out of the car.
Unfortunately, there was no replay of this accident, and it wasn't because of any driver injuries or anything like that. Thankfully, all the drivers were okay from this accident, but the biggest issue of this wreck was that 28 fans in the stands were injured. and had to be treated for injuries, including 2 that were critically injured with life-threatening injuries, which is definitely something that should never happen while attending a race. As far as I know, everyone would recover from their injuries, as some people got transported just to the infield care center of the track while others got transported to a local hospital. But thankfully, since this accident, Daytona has upgraded and drastically improved safety with the new Daytona Rising grandstands that they built a couple years ago. Unfortunately for Steve Park, he's going to make this list again. In 1998, during practice at Atlanta Motor Speedway, he cut a tire in turn number 4 and pounded the outside wall. Unfortunately, the throttle was stuck, and he would pound the outside wall one more time before shooting down towards the infield and hitting the pit wall in the pits before coming to a stop. Steve would receive quite a few injuries in this wreck, as he broke his leg and his clavicle, as well as chipping 2 of his teeth, which is something I've never personally actually heard of happening in an accident, at least not anytime recently. Steve would go on to miss the next 14 races before finally returning in the summer at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the Brickyard 400. I mentioned earlier about the 1988 Daytona 500 being the first race with the restrictor plates. Well, the 1987 Winston 500 at Talladega was the last straw for NASCAR, which led them to create the restrictor plate, as Bobby Allison ran over a piece of debris which blew his tire out, which caused him to spin backwards and get airborne. He was traveling at around 210 miles an hour and went right into the catch fence, wiping out 100 feet of it completely.
Oh, we have a problem. Bobby Allison with a horrible crash here on the front stretch. It has torn out a complete section of protective railing separating it. Alan Kowicki becomes involved.
Debris and is collecting other cars. There was a lot of debris in the front stretch. Kowicki was involved. Richard Petty, I think, is another one of the cars. Lots of debris on the front stretch. Now, Bobby's car, to me, appeared to stay together quite well. He did get up into the fencing, but not into the stands.
And it was close, though. He has torn out a whole large area of guardrail. There it is, protecting the crowd from the racetrack, and he came very, very close to going into the stands. The car became airborne and went flying literally into that wall and catch fencing, but fortunately it did stay onto the racetrack.
Bobby Allison was uninjured in this accident, but unfortunately 5 spectators were injured in the grandstands. 2 of them had to be sent to the hospital, while 3 were sent down to the infield care center for their treatment. Thankfully, nobody was fatally injured, but I did hear that one fan did end up losing an eye due to debris, but I cannot confirm if this was actually true or not.
Right rear, it begins to shred, and the car goes out of control. You're at 210 miles an hour. You can see the right rear going. You see the debris there on the left-hand side of your screen. Earnhardt avoids Bobby. The car goes backwards. The aerodynamics get underneath the car, and Allison gets up into the fence. The aerodynamics lifted the car. They're not built to go backwards. Right underneath Harold Kinder. Harold, he stayed in there. Boy, I'll tell you, talk about a trooper. Kinder is right there. He's got the yellow flag out right away. That is a veteran, confident flagman. Here comes the rest of the field down. They've decelerated to maybe 180 miles an hour, but all the debris, there's Petty, there's Kowicki spinning. There's just nowhere for many of these drivers to go because there's so much of what was left over from the initial impact on the front stretch, and there was just nowhere to go.
And tires began to explode too as they ran over debris caused by the Allison crash. Well, it's very rare that you see that catch fencing do its job, but it sure did its job here at Talladega today, as if it hadn't been there, or if it had not been as strong as it was, Bobby Allison's car would very clearly have gone into the grandstand right below us here in the broadcast booth. There's the tire going.
Here's another angle of it, and we'll just let you watch it because we've covered it well.
There goes Darrell Waltrip going by without becoming involved in it, but as I said, as the cars came down now, they were running over the debris of the Allison car, and tires were blowing, and therefore they became involved in the crash. There's Petty, Alan Kowicki, Phil Parsons made contact with the Bobby Allison car. We understand that it's brand new catch fencing up here, and boy, we just salute the people here at Talladega for building it as strong as they did. There is a stretcher that we can see down there, a couple of stretchers, as a matter of fact, being lifted into the grandstand area, so perhaps there were some spectators that were hit by flying debris.
The 1988 ARCA race at Atlanta Motor Speedway saw one of the most brutal accidents I have ever seen. And I know at this time ARCA was not part of NASCAR, but NASCAR owns ARCA now, so that's why I included it in this compilation.
Oh, a terrible crash up in turn number 4 as one car impacted the pit wall. Lee Raymond was one of those involved, but that was not the car that turned over in the 4th turn. We will stand by and get the names, and we believe it to be, we're not going to say because we just simply are not going to speculate who it is at the moment, but that was a terrible impact down there in turn number 4 as the car, there are large tires there at the end of the pit wall, and that is what the car hit. That lessened the impact somewhat, Ned, but still it was very bad.
Of course, that's the reason the tires are put there, is to lessen the impact in case a car does hit it. But boy, that car hit it so hard and went up in the air and over the end of the pit wall, and now it's resting down on the inside of the pit retaining wall.
We'll take a look at it once again. Lee Raymond was one of the original cars involved. He spun to the inside and then was hit by the other car. Violent impact there. We'll take a look at it from another angle. You can see some other cars becoming involved.
Okay, here is Raymond up against the outside wall and comes down across the racetrack in front of the traffic. I don't know if he had a flat tire or what, and then the other car hits him and hits those big tractor tires at the end, and the car goes spiraling over down to the inside of the pit wall.
And we'll take a look at it from one more angle.
You can see Raymond's car very high. I think he just got up in the loose stuff and lost it, hit the wall there. Front end bounces against the wall. He tries to keep it up there, but all of a sudden it starts coming down across the racetrack and towards that end of the pit wall. Then you can see the green car trying to dodge him, and he hits the abutment head on. Thank goodness for those big tractor tires. They certainly took a lot of the brunt of the crash, but it still sent the car spiraling over and down to the inside of the pit wall.
There you can see Lee Raymond, who is being assisted out of the car. And we now confirm that the car that was involved and became airborne and overturned was the number 50 machine driven by Don Marmor, and the rescue effort there continues.
Don Marmor was seriously injured in this accident as he had several broken bones and was impaled by the steering wheel of the race car and was knocked unconscious during the impact. But what is really unique about this situation is that Dr. Jerry Punch, who was working pit road as a pit reporter during this race, actually ran down to the end and saved his life, including putting an IV in his heart while he was still in the race car. He was airlifted to a hospital where he would spend the next several months there, and then when he was finally released there, he would spend another 5 weeks in rehab. Unfortunately, Don would never race again, but he is still here and works as an auto body mechanic. The 1991 Pepsi 400 at Daytona saw Darrell Waltrip take this wild ride down the back straightaway after contact with Alan Kulwicki and Joe Ruttman.
Out of the second turn and down the backstretch. That's Waltrip and Alan Kulwicki leading this.
Oh,
look at
Earnhardt got sideways. Somebody looked like made some contact with
we've got a problem.
Contact here, for sure. Darrell Waltrip and Joe Ruttman. Waltrip's car gets on his roof and over and over.
Darrell Waltrip tumbling down the backstretch in what appears to be a very, very serious crash. Joe Ruttman, the other car involved in that incident.
That we see Darrell. He's down on the inside of Kulwicki, and Joe Ruttman right behind him. Now here comes Earnhardt. Looks like someone had tapped him. Kulwicki came down and touched Darrell.
Threw it back into Ruttman.
Ruttman gets in the side of him, and here's the road they hit.
Yep. When he hits the road, it gets him airborne, and the car starts over. Of course, he was being pushed by the car number 75. That was just a circumstance there.
There was certainly nothing aerodynamic that caused that crash. When they went over that paved road, which is part of the road course, that's when the car got airborne and began to flip. Here's another angle.
We'll see Darrell down on the inside of Alan Kulwicki. And there's Earnhardt pulling out, making it 3 abreast back there. But quick. He was up a little bit high, and Darrell looked like they just went together as they came off of turn 2 and started Darrell to the infield, and Rutten took him with him.
Car rolled over 5 or 6 times and came to rest on its side.
Although Darrell Waltrip did get knocked out in this accident, he was okay, and in typical DW fashion, DW being DW, he managed to kind of regain consciousness as they were trying to cut him out of the car. As Darrell was still half out of it, he got upset at the man who was sawing the roll bar to try to cut him out of the car, as this was the first race that Darrell raced owning his own team, and he thought he could fix that car and reuse it again, obviously not knowing the severity of the damage. The 2016 Craftsman Truck Series opener saw C. Bell take this wild ride after taking the white flag.
Run, they're crashing. Christopher Bell upside down.
Christopher Bell took this wild tumble down the middle of the track, which seemed like it was going to go on forever, but he was okay, managed to get out of the truck under his own power.
On the outside, second in line, Peters gets bumped.
Looks like William Byron got jumped by the 86. Look at Timothy Peters on the inside as Christopher Bell tumbles down the front straightaway. Timothy all the way to the inside of the racetrack is, you know, a lot of new pavement down there, guys, and that makes such a huge difference. They don't get any grass. A lot of huge pavement scrubs off a lot of that speed.
I count 13 rolls for Christopher Bell. Watch it.
Well, Daniel Hemrick almost went underneath that 4 truck of Christopher Bell.
It's a testament to the safety of these racing vehicles that Christopher Bell can take that kind of ride
Christopher
and
Bell
then drop the window net and climb out.
Very fortunate that these trucks are as safe as they are. Look at this truck just get out of control. Probably about the fastest part of this speedway field, right out of the tri-oval.
It just starts tumbling.
That young man with his dirt racing background, I'm sure he's had many barrel rolls in his career, but none like that.
And Michael, I know you've been upside down. I've been upside down like that. The flipping's not that bad, but it's the landing that hurts. And that thing landed about 6 or 8 times pretty hard.
What about Brandon Brown? He slides through there. Looks like he's going to be credited with a 4th place finish.
I think he might have got in the back of William Byron, and that's what got in the back of the 4 of Christopher Bell and turned him sideways.
Wow.
The 2006 Kentucky Xfinity Series race saw Jeff Fuller take one of the hardest hits you will ever see, as the car basically imploded on impact, and the damage is absolutely insane. The car literally looks like a crumpled beer can.
Looks to, oh, trouble. Jason Leffler, the 38 car.
Ooh. 34 call hard impact with the inside of the wall on the backstretch there.
That's Jeff Fuller in the 34 car. Jason Leffler gets his car moving. Top right of your screen. Have some trouble off turn number 2 there. He's already made contact with the outside wall. Here comes Jeff Fuller to avoid hitting him right in the door. He turns his car hard left, but unfortunately he's not going to be able to spin it around. He's going to make some awfully hard contact with the inside wall.
Phil couldn't hit it in a worse place. I mean, it was angled to the opening on the pit, inside wall on the backstretch. There's an opening there. Hit at a bad angle, hit flat, you know, right there. Just a bad place to do that. But what Jeff Fuller was trying to do was trying to avoid hitting Jason Leffler. You know, you're thinking it looks like there's a lot of time to make decisions here, but this is a split-second decision, you know, from Jeff Fuller to come. If you'll notice, as he comes into the picture here, he's heading right for the door for Jason Leffler, decides to make a hard left to miss contact with Jason Leffler, and went right into the inside wall, hit it, you know, at exactly the wrong spot where that opening is on that flat contact. And as you know, that flat part of the wall there is is a bad place to do it.
Jason Leffler spins and Jeff Fuller does his best to try to avoid him, but ends up spinning into the inside wall where there is an opening for the safety crew, hits on a flush angle and absolutely pancakes the right side of the car. The damage ricocheted through the whole chassis and literally crumpled the left side of the car that didn't hit anything. The car burst into flames. He never lost consciousness or anything like that, but he was taken to the hospital as he had to be treated for some smoke inhalation, and thankfully he only had a broken finger and wrist due to this impact. It took some time to cut him out of the car, but it's truly a miracle that he was able to survive this. And it was later determined that the car crumpled like this due to a faulty roll cage, which is absolutely insane, and he's extremely fortunate. Well, that's gonna do it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Part number 3 of my NASCAR Brutal Crash compilation. If you like motorsports history, make sure to subscribe to the channel and make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you enjoyed this. That's gonna do it. Hope to see you in my next one. Take care, everyone.